got to start with, all right, eh? How you doing, you hoser?
Well done, eh? Well done, eh?
Going on, eh? Yeah. Do you have a little bat handy, eh? Can you go down to the rink and drink some 50? Great to see you again, Brian.
And you, sir. Thanks for doing this. So grateful.
So we got the Canadians living in America, and I'm super happy to have you back. You were one of the first, one of the originals to pioneer with us on Leadership Care, and that was so appreciated and still is. And so now we're revisiting basically, and just share with us a little bit about what's happening with you and Stimson now. How did 2020 end, and more importantly, what's up for 2021?
Yeah. So look, it's all great news, Mark, that I can share. Obviously, it has been tough managing through a pandemic, but this is not a personal experience for us. We know, and it's really been. I will say on the think tank sector, it's been particularly tough. I think the pandemic and obviously the economic situation across the country, around the world. In that, a recent study came out and predicts that, get this, 25 to 30% of think tanks will not exist at the end of the pandemic. So that there's going to be unquestionably kind of a huge rationalization across the industry, which is really terrible. You think about kind of the intellectual capital that gets lost, and the kind of the policy inputs and the implications that could have are really.
Before you go
Yeah.
on, why? Is it cost or what? Why?
Yeah, it's basically, our organizations like ours rely upon kind of philanthropic contributions, right? And so, and especially at a time like this, as we know, philanthropy in the United States, which has always been an amazing thing, and it's really kind of it's a remarkable thing in the American economy of how generous Americans are with their philanthropy. While philanthropy has not taken a significant hit, that philanthropy has been redirected, right? And so it's difficult for, how do you make a case for a think tank that we should be studying policy 10 years down the road when we have, children who are, not eating properly because of the downturn in the economy. So I think principally for those factors, just the general downturn in the economy, it's had a significant impact. We've been really lucky at Stimson. I mean, our work, as we discussed last time, Mark, really is sort of pragmatically oriented, and so it's less the work and our partners. It's less of a nice to have and more of a, we are on the ground in the trenches with our partners, whether they're government or industry or what have you. And so we benefited from that, I think. And so we actually grew through 2020 amazingly, not just in terms of revenue, but also in the work that we do. And importantly, even in the global rankings of think tanks, we jettisoned from kind of 17th in the United States up into the top 10 this year. So
That's
we've
awesome.
had a really nice, we've had a really nice kind of recognition of the good work that folks do at the organization. So yeah, it's kind of a fun time to be at Stimson, and we're in the process now of taking another sort of big leap forward in that one of our really closest peer think tanks, a group called the East-West Institute that operated out of New York for the past 40 years. They have been hit. They were hit very hard by COVID and had to shut their doors. And so we've been in the process over the past couple of months of acquiring and kind of their healthy programs to make sure that the good work that they do is able to continue. So yeah, no, it's a fun time to be at the organization.
Well, this should be an example of why you put a good Canadian in charge.
It's really the answer to all, right? It's really the answer to everything. Yeah. It's when you think about Alex Trebek. Look what he did for Jeopardy. Huh?
Exactly, and Gretzky, what he did for LA.
Yeah, exactly. Huh?
There's the answer.
That's
So,
what these Americans learn.
what are some highlight projects that are going on right now?
Yeah, so we got a lot of great stuff. So as you might imagine, our climate and environmental work has really picked up steam. So I'd had to highlight a couple of things. I think we talked a little bit last time maybe about an initiative that we launched with the global reinsurance industry and Bloomberg that is essentially a tool that takes 100 different indicators of climate change and runs those through particular geographic context. So we're looking at kind of large urban areas in countries of the developed world and how a changing climate is going to impact them, that essentially helps them prioritize risk in ways, helps the global donor community direct resources more specifically at very targeted problems, but also brings in private industry as our partners and actors in this. As we talked about last time, Mark, it's our belief that, that you take any global issue, whether it's climate or health or a security issue, terrorism, the ability of governments to positively influence those kind of grand challenges is dropping, I think, so precipitously. And the ability of other actors, I think, notably private industry, is growing in ways that we, I think, standing in the midst of it, we really just can't even imagine, which makes the work that you all do so important in trying to cultivate leaders that recognize there is a nexus between, doing good and doing well, right? That we can actually have both things running alongside one another, and it not only creates good public policy and better ends, but it's good for business as well, right? So that's kind of one example of, it's called the Climate and Ocean Risk Vulnerability Index. So it's really kind of we're really hitting our stride. Another one that I'm really proud of is a new initiative that we launched towards the end of last year called the Alliance for a Climate Resilient Earth. So as you know, so much of the attention on climate and climate change issues has really been on the mitigation side, rightly. So how do we cut emissions? The dark underbelly of that, of course, that we don't want to admit is that, as we're seeing from Texas to, pick your country around the world right now, we're seeing the implications of climate change right now. And so the importance of adaptation to a changing climate is almost every bit as important as mitigation, unfortunately, now, because the train, sadly has left the station in some ways. So therefore, we are again kind of recognizing that no one government or even coalition of governments is going to solve this problem. It really is going to take a whole of society approach, NGOs, private industry, governments, international organizations. And so we've created this Alliance for a Climate Resilient Earth, ACRE, that is bringing together large corporations from AECOM to engineering firm, other engineering firms, to government labs, to NASA, and NGOs in a kind of giant coalition to essentially share information more effectively and hopefully build kind of synergy. So one of the things we're proud of, we're working closely with a group of engineers on a new global standard for resilience in the built environment, with the hope that we can not just kind of get governments to enact new elevated standards for resilience, but that we can actually kind of manipulate the marketplace and ensure that investment is appropriately pushed towards those projects that are ultimately climate resilient.
You say the built in, can you explain that?
Yeah, I can. So we're working with the ASCE group. I'm sure you're familiar with. It's a U.S. based, but really it's a global consortium of engineers that have been working for quite some time on, as I say, this resiliency standard for the built environment. So if it is constructed out there, there should be standards of resilience built into it. We believe that if governments begin to recognize and accept that elevated resiliency standard, that it will eventually create kind of an economic rationale for resilience, for building resilience into, as I say, the built environment. So, for instance, we might imagine a government that is investing in X infrastructure project, a bridge. How do we build resiliency standards in that because as it operates now, obviously the government is going to look for the cheapest, fastest option to construct that bridge. And in the long term, it may actually be a terrible investment in that with a changing climate, it's obviously going to be impacted by changing environmental circumstances. And so unless you look at the life cycle of that bridge, if you look at how much it's going to cost, through construction, full stop, then yeah, you want to build it as cheaply as possible. But if we take the full life cycle costs associated with that, then building resiliency into those standards at the front end is just going to make more sense. So it's our goal really to kind of bring these communities together, not just in the engineering space, but across the board. If you're an NGO that's building out the mangrove in Jamaica, or if you are producing, building a dam along the Mekong Delta. So, we're trying to, again, have this globalized standard that will bring together investors, government officials, engineers, and the like.
Yeah, that's spectacular. It's so clear that it's always been clear. Number one, about if you're chintzy at the beginning, it's going to cost you more later. So we definitely have to think more long term, and it's been, it's happening right now. We can see what happens. But you're so right about. I heard somebody today, they were talking about Texas, saying that we never expected this type of storm. And then someone said, well, the fact that people are saying, it's one time in a century that this has happened, but it's not going to be one time in a century anymore, right? It's going to be way more often, and we have to think about it, which sounds like you're on the leading edge of thinking about it.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right, Mark. Yeah, no, it's a really exciting project. Also, I just might add, it's such a refreshing to be interviewed by someone who can say "about" correctly.
I don't know what you're talking about. But another thing I wanted to add to that, because I know you've also been involved in peace, and
Yeah.
all these things can turn into peace if people and countries and whatnot are working together to do certain things. That can be peace, and we come into a common goal. It sounds so simple, but it is real, and we can learn how to work together on the things that are important and not argue against each other on the stuff, for lack of a technical word, that we differ on, that may be even emotional or ideological,
Yeah.
and whatnot. So I think that's a big part. I'm seeing it with agribusiness. I'm seeing it with water. I'm seeing it with where, I think we've talked about this. One of our partners, clients, is Eco Peace Middle East, where the Jordanians, Palestinians, Israelis are working together. Started with water, now it's with agriculture, and it's going into tourism, and they're working together. Do they agree on everything? No, but they're actually having peace.
Yeah.
So give a little comment on that, how by bringing all these parties together, maybe even that would never have come together before, that can create peace. Am I off the wall, or is that not true?
No, I think you're absolutely right. And this again, Mark, it's what makes what you all are doing so, in my view, important, right? In that, oftentimes in virtually any issue that we're working, as you say, we work on the hardest security issues, terrorism, violent ethnic conflict, to energy, to food, to water issues. And what we find often is that when governments are involved, right, that's when the politics, can clash. And even if you think back to the coldest days of the Cold War, when the United States and the Soviet Union were politically at one another's throats, Washington and Moscow, that whole level of society beneath, whether it's NGOs, scientists, private industry, student groups, right, are engaging with one another and, really helping us to avoid conflict throughout the Cold War. And we can see that replicated now throughout more modern history, right, since the end of the Cold War, where kind of bringing those sub-state groups together. So the politicians can fight at this level, right? But as long as we can engage productively with one another. And I think, industry has, again, it has a unique role to play. If you think about the partnerships that exist even between American and Chinese companies, right? There are workable partnerships that are happening. We consider ourselves, as we sit in Washington, strategic competitors, and the language is all phrased around competition and conflict. Whereas, for two businessmen or two businesswomen on respective sides of the Pacific. It's about making money and building jobs and raising capital. And so it's a different conversation that can actually bring, I think, societies together, and much better if both of those industry partners on either side recognize that, hey, we need clean water in order to we need a clean environment. We need to ensure that there's no conflict. We need a stable business environment. So let's try to calm tensions down. There's a great story. If I can just take 2 seconds, Mark, you may remember back a good number of years ago, when a group of Pakistani militants stormed the Indian parliament, and there was a shootout right in parliament. Good number of people passed away, many more were injured, and it touched off what's called the Twin Peaks crisis between India and Pakistan. And it looked like, as you know, two nuclear armed states, it looked at some point that conflict was going to go nuclear, that it was going to go hot. So in the retelling, our retelling of the story officially in Washington is, well, we engaged in shuttle diplomacy. The politicians got together and tensions were, the United States intervened, the UN intervened and calmed tensions down. The real story was that the State Department issued an advisory, and American business leaders woke up, opened the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal one morning and read that the State Department was recommending that all Americans leave South Asia immediately. So we had these business leaders from major US companies who all got together, and they had a message for the leaders of India and Pakistan. And the message was pretty simple. It said, we've invested a lot of money over the course of the past 20 years in your countries. If we have to leave, we will never be back. We will never be back. And almost immediately tensions were right. So in that case, you have private industry preventing nuclear conflict. I mean, it's an astonishing success story that I think we don't kind of fully inculcate.
That is brilliant, and it shows that peace can come from interdependency, because there's too much to lose.
Exactly.
If you can't figure out there's too much to gain, then you will definitely figure out there's too much to lose.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Super story. Hey, thanks for coming back and visiting, and we'll talk again soon for sure.
Such a pleasure. Thanks again, Mark.